She was looking up at the wall when a pair of red high heels reflected in the mirror caught her eye. After being missing for a few days, her best friend was shockingly found hanged in a wardrobe. Her funeral was simple and quiet, but rumors quickly spread in the company, claiming she had undergone cosmetic surgery. The manager summoned her to the office and revealed that her friend hadn't committed suicide due to a botched surgery, but because she had been embezzling company funds for years. The manager asked for her cooperation in the investigation, but she chose to refuse. Unable to believe that her gentle friend was capable of such a crime, she resigned and, heartbroken, began sorting through her belongings. To her shock, she discovered 2 billion Korean won among her possessions, a staggering amount for him. The girl, whose name was Oh In-ju, had endured a difficult life. 5 years ago, her father died in a car accident, leaving behind a 400 million won debt. Their mother, indifferent to her daughter's struggles, lived a carefree life abroad. The eldest sister was a news reporter who had been suspended for secretly drinking while covering stories. The youngest sister dreamed of studying abroad, but their mother took her tuition money for travel, forcing her to sell artwork to cover school fees. Oh In-ju, the second sister, was a marginalized company employee who faced constant ostracism. The 2 older sisters had to work tirelessly to repay their father's debt and support their youngest sister's education. Oh In-ju's best friend, also from a poor background, had always taken special care of her, offering warmth and support. Oh In-ju refused to believe that her friend had committed suicide over embezzlement. Before disappearing, her friend had sent her a secret email containing evidence against those who had bullied her at the company and left behind a large bag of cash. Oh In-ju was devastated and overwhelmed, unsure of what had happened to her friend or what to do with the money. Her friend's tragic death left Oh In-ju with a bag of money she was too afraid to touch. She hid it in a vegetable bin, cautiously taking out a small amount to fulfill a simple dream of buying ice cream. Determined to uncover the truth behind her friend's death, Oh In-ju sought out the company's gossip king. She revealed rumors that her friend had colluded with the company's financial officer to embezzle funds. Oh In-ju was left with lingering questions and an unresolved mystery about her friend's fate. She noticed a unique pair of shoes, but she distinctly remembered that her friend only wore limited edition collections. Curious, she decided to wear the shoes and visit the boutique where they were purchased. The store clerk revealed that the shoes had been bought by the company's financial officer. This revelation shocked Oh In-ju. Could the rumors be true? Had her best friend been involved in an inappropriate relationship with the financial officer? Digging further, Oh In-ju found another social media account belonging to her friend. To her surprise, her best friend appeared to have 2 identities, one as a modest, uniformed worker, and the other as a wealthy socialite living in Singapore. On the Singapore account, Oh In-ju spotted a man who resembled the financial officer. Pretending to cooperate, she accepted the financial officer's offer to investigate her friend's alleged embezzlement of 700 billion won. She brought him to her friend's residence and shared the evidence she had collected. However, he seemed indifferent and made unwelcome advances toward her, growing excited at the sight of her high heels. Just as Oh In-ju struggled to react, the financial officer was suddenly terrified by an orchid on the vanity. He fled in panic, even though he was supposedly a director of the Orchid Association. Oh In-ju, shaken but determined, decided to investigate the connection between her friend's death and the financial officer. She later received a mysterious package containing high heels identical to those her friend had worn when she was found hanging. Upon further investigation, Oh In-ju learned that her friend had been a member of the Orchid Association. Another member, In-kyung, had also been rumored to embezzle funds with the financial officer and had committed suicide under eerily similar circumstances. It became clear that both women had an inseparable connection with the financial officer. In-pig began to suspect that he had coerced them into embezzlement and then silenced them permanently. Determined to get answers, she confronted him, but he denied any involvement, claiming that In-kyung's death had prompted her friend to voluntarily take over the role. He insisted that he was merely a pawn in a larger scheme. Confused and frustrated, Oh In-ju watched as the financial officer drove away angrily. In the chaos, Oh In-ju noticed an orchid in the car, a flower associated with death. The financial officer, visibly panicked, crashed the vehicle and fled the scene. As Oh Inju tried to process what had just happened, her phone rang. It was a call from Doli, who asked if she was safe, as though aware of something significant. At the hospital, Oh Inju questioned Doli about his cryptic call, but instead of giving a direct answer, he showed her a video. The video revealed a brilliant young woman who, within a year abroad, turned 50,000 won into 70 million through investments. That woman was none other than In-hye, Oh Inju's eldest sister. Taken in by their grandmother at a young age, In-hye was later sent to study abroad, where she learned how to trade stocks, growing her grandmother's initial investment into a fortune. After returning to Korea, In-hye struggled under their grandmother's controlling nature and eventually chose to move back in with her sisters. Despite their father's debts and their mother's indifference, the three sisters remained strong and close-knit. In-hye, passionate about justice, became a news reporter. However, her empathetic nature often led her to tears during interviews, earning frequent criticism from her superiors. One day, while covering a major story, she reported on Park Jae-seo, a well-known lawyer running for the Korean presidential candidacy. Park had publicly apologized to wrongfully imprisoned victims in a bid to gain public favor. Though the apology was seen as a headline-worthy gesture, In-hye suspected it was mere political posturing. During her investigation, In-hye uncovered a dark secret. 4 years ago, Park Jae-seo had handled a high-profile savings bank case involving 32 plaintiffs. The 4 plaintiffs under his direct care had all mysteriously committed suicide after meeting with him. Their funds had been transferred to Park's wife's brother. Alarmed by the implications, In-hye's boss encouraged her to dig deeper. At a charity press conference, she publicly confronted Park about his involvement in the savings bank case. Caught off guard, Park shot her a menacing glare but remained silent. After the press conference, Park confronted In-hye in the hall, questioning why she had asked such a provocative question. The tense exchange was captured on camera by one of her colleagues. Back at the office, the atmosphere was tense. Without warning, a colleague pulled out a breathalyzer and accused In-hye of drinking on the job, further complicating her already precarious situation. In-hye, suspended from work after her secret drinking habit was exposed, was summoned by her grandmother for tea. Her grandmother, aware of her financial troubles, offered her a job at the family company. However, In-hye resolutely refused. As she left, she unexpectedly encountered an old friend whom her grandmother had also called over. Shortly after, In-hye received a mysterious call from a relative of one of the victims in the bank case she was investigating. The caller wanted to meet that evening to share information. On her way to the meeting, In-hye witnessed a car accident and had a sudden premonition. She repeatedly dialed the caller's number, but there was no answer. Rushing to the scene, she was devastated to find that the accident victim was the person she was supposed to meet. Her friend picked up a familiar orchid from the ground, the same type found at the scene of her sister Oh Inju's friend's death. Meanwhile, Oh Inju, now burdened with the 20 billion won left by her deceased friend and a stack of confidential files exposing corruption at her company, was in turmoil. Her friend had left instructions. If she didn't know what to do, she should seek out UN, the former company president who had been ousted during a power struggle and institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital. Despite being poor and desperate, Oh Inju felt uneasy about keeping the money. UN advised Oh Inju to spend all the money, claiming it was the root of her troubles. He then handed her a supposedly life-saving folder, containing what he claimed were all the secrets of the company's corruption. However, as they spoke, someone knocked on the door. UN hurriedly led Oh Inju to escape through the window using a rope. The visitor turned out to be Doli, who had traced the financial officer's last whereabouts to the psychiatric hospital. Inside, he searched frantically but found no files, only Oh Inju's forgotten phone, confirming that she had taken the documents. Doli deduced that UN's folder was not a protective measure, but evidence intended to bring down the current company president. Realizing that exposing the files could endanger Oh Inju's life, Doli warned her of UN's manipulative intentions. Feeling overwhelmed and betrayed, Oh Inju was at a loss. Doli suggested a daring plan: protect the files, confront the president, and extort money, splitting it evenly between them. After deliberating, Oh Inju made up her mind. She would take control of her destiny, no matter the risks. Inju returned home and gave her younger sister 100,000 as pocket money, but she didn't appreciate it at all. She had made wealthy friends and told her she was going abroad to study with them. The tuition fees were sponsored by her wealthy friend's family. Oh Inju was furious, but her younger sister said she'd rather work hard for a rich family than continue living in poverty. She went to meet her wealthy friend's family and discovered that her friend was the daughter of Park Sang-jung, who was running for president. Park Sang-jung's wife had paid 70 million yuan up front for the younger sister's tuition fees. After Oh Inju left, Park Sang-jung's wife immediately launched an investigation into how the seemingly poor eldest sister suddenly acquired so much money. Behind Park Sang-jung's wife, the mysterious orchid flower appeared again. In-hee opened the fridge and found 2 large boxes of cash, leaving her stunned. She had never seen so much money in her life. Furious, she waited for her younger sister to return and questioned her about where the money came from, suspecting it might be related to her deceased friend. The younger sister admitted she didn't care if she spent it all and ended up in prison. The eldest sister, who was a journalist, had been suspended due to being framed by colleagues while investigating a banking scandal involving Park Sang-jung. She had found a key witness, but the witness died in a mysterious car accident. The witness's brother found the journalist and handed her a USB drive. On it, she discovered information about one of the bank scandal victims who had been extremely afraid of death. After speaking with Park Sang-jung, the victim had unexpectedly committed suicide while holding a mysterious orchid flower. The orchid was identical to the one found at the witness's car accident scene. Through further investigation, they found that the victim's nurse recognized the flower and said it was given to the victim by Park Sang-jung. At the time, Park Sang-jung had a cold, chilling gaze that frightened the nurse. The journalist then found a book that specialized in research about this mysterious orchid, which seemed to have connections to an ancient British family and possibly other cryptic events. Meanwhile, In-hee's younger sister found herself in a perilous situation. Lured by Park Sang-jung's wife to a secluded room adorned with blooming orchids, she unknowingly fell into a dangerous trap. Park Sang-jung's wife handed her an orchid, urging her to smell it. The unsuspecting sister was unaware that the orchid was a tool for mind control. As the effects took hold, she began experiencing vivid hallucinations and complied with the wife's eerie request to draw a smiling face. As the sinister plot involving the orchid deepened, In-hee realized the stakes were higher than ever. If you had 2 billion, what would you do? The first thing Oh Inju thought of was buying an apartment by the river. She lay on the apartment floor, happily describing it to her elder sister, only to be scolded. Her elder sister said that accepting ill-gotten money would violate her principles and warned that if Oh Inju insisted, they would cut ties. She then hung up. Oh Inju received news that her younger sister had been hospitalized after fainting. Unaware that the woman in front of her had framed her sister, Oh Inju even expressed gratitude. The doctor said the younger sister had a congenital heart condition and needed immediate surgery. Oh Inju told her elder sister that she could give up buying the apartment but would use the money for the surgery. As she was about to withdraw the money, she got a call from Do Lee, who warned her not to touch the funds because Park Sang-jung's wife was investigating her. However, Oh Inju entered the elevator and missed the rest of the conversation. Just as she opened her bag to get the money, Park Sang-jung's assistant appeared with thugs. Oh Inju knelt and pleaded with the assistant to lend her enough for the surgery. The assistant was unmoved and even prepared to use a stick to beat her. Fortunately, Do Lee arrived just in time, knowing Oh Inju hadn't heard his warning. Park Sang-jung's wife also appeared, pretending to care for Oh Inju and scolding the assistant. However, it was all part of a scheme by Park and his wife. Park planned to run for president under the guise of a charity foundation, but his poll numbers were only second. His assistant suggested one more move to turn the tide. Park's wife mentioned that a friend's daughter had heart disease and asked if they could use the charity's funds, smiling knowingly with the assistant. First, they took Oh Inju's 2 billion. Then Park's wife befriended her by claiming to be a friend of her deceased best friend. She invited Oh Inju to work for her. Oh Inju was skeptical, saying she didn't believe the rich and poor could be friends, but when offered help with the surgery, she wavered. The younger sister's condition worsened. During the surgery, a strange voice was heard. Outside the operating room, the elder sister noticed Oh-inju's injuries, but Oh-inju tried to cover them up, saying it was just from crying too much. She promised to figure out the money situation. To put on a show, Park Sang-jung brought a media team to visit the younger sister. The elder sister saw through his intentions and tried to kick them out, but the younger sister agreed to the interview. The elder sister pulled Oh-inju aside, questioning whether she was trying to please Park's family for money. When the assistant was about to pay the medical fees, an unexpected benefactor intervened. A wealthy grandmother of the three impoverished sisters. After the surgery, the younger sister announced that she would stay at Park's house and even planned to study abroad with their daughter. Oh-inju was shocked by the change in her younger sister, but the elder sister accused her of being the same. To clear the misunderstanding, Oh-inju revealed evidence of Park Sang-jung's corruption to her elder sister and promised to quit working for his wife. The elder sister asked for the documents. That evening, Do-lee met with Oh-inju and presented information from her investigation in Singapore. Oh-inju was shocked to discover that her late best friend had lived in Singapore under her name for 3 years, attended business school, purchased a luxury mobile home, and even held the missing 70 billion in her name. Oh-inju remembered signing a document for her friend, realizing that everything had been premeditated. She told Do-lee she had to go to Singapore, but Do-lee strongly advised against it, warning that Park's wife was investigating her. He urged her to accept Park's wife's job offer instead, as she attended the Orchid Festival in Singapore every year to launder money under the guise of orchid trading. This way, Oh-inju could legitimately go to Singapore and investigate the truth from the inside. Inside the seemingly picture-perfect Park household, Park Sang-jung is a controlling terror, prone to violent outbursts when dissatisfied, while his wife frequently descends into fits of panic. Their daughter, Hwa-young, suffers from anxiety-induced breathing issues. The youngest sister tries to comfort Hwa-young by suggesting she express her fears through drawing. However, the seemingly innocent child produces chilling images that hint at the family's dark secrets. Despite the previous day's explosive arguments, Park Sang-jung and his wife appear at a public gathering as a picture of marital bliss. However, during the event, Park's wife nearly chokes on a sip of red wine, visibly disturbed. Oh-inju follows her into the restroom, sensing that something more sinister is unfolding. Park Sang-jung's wife leads her to a clothing store to pick out a formal suit. When leaving, she forgoes her own car and exits through the back door with Oh-inju. In the taxi, Park Sang-jung's wife reveals that she wants to visit the home of Oh-inju's deceased best friend. Once there, while sitting on the floor of the friend's house, she suddenly bursts into tears, lamenting the loss and confessing that her own family is far from happy. She goes on to express her admiration for Park Sang-jung's presidential ambition, noting that while she is drawn to his drive, Park himself is attracted by her prestigious background as the daughter of a general. Later that evening, Oh-inju arranges to meet Do-lee at a bar and comments that she finds Park Sang-jung's wife pitiable. Do-lee, amused, tells her that her most charming trait is taking everyone's words at face value, a quality that might soon work in her favor since Park Sang-jung's wife is expected to take her to Singapore, which would enable Oh-inju to further investigate into her best friend's mysterious case. The eldest sister happens to see Do-lee escorting Oh-inju home and mistakenly assumes the two are romantically involved. However, she is aware that Do-lee once had ties to a money laundering organization. Shortly after, Oh-inju looks up and notices an orchid hanging on the wall, and she asks her eldest sister where it came from. She remarks that the orchid is identical to the one in her best friend's room, and even to the one at the death scene, and then produces it for inspection. Intrigued and determined to uncover its significance, her eldest sister contacts the author of an orchid monograph, who provides an address, claiming that the person there knows more about the orchid than anyone else. When Oh-inju visits the address, disguised as a news reporter along with a friend, she enters the venue, which turns out to be a school exhibition hall. There, the curator shows them a treasured orchids while photographing the school's alumni. Oh Inju unexpectedly encounters a former colleague who had once framed her. Clutching all the evidence she has gathered, she confronts the news station leadership, who find the unfolding tale so strange that they question whether she has been drinking, only to be interrupted by an incoming phone call. Oh Inju receives a call from her younger sister, who says that Hua Young left her phone at home. Oh Inju goes to Hua Young's room to search for it. While retrieving the phone, she notices a disturbing drawing that shocks her. A woman in red high heels hanging by her neck. The image is eerily identical to the scene of her deceased best friend, death. Alarmed, Oh Inju rushes to Hua Young's school to question her, but Hua Young nervously insists that she doesn't know her friend. Seeing Hua Young's anxiety, Oh Inju decides to drop the topic for the moment. Upon returning home, Hua Young goes missing. Surveillance footage reveals that she's in a car in the underground parking garage. Oh Inju and her sister rush to the scene and find Hua Young unconscious in the vehicle. As they rescue her, a dashcam accidentally falls from the car. When they check the footage, they discover that it captures the route to Oh Inju's best friend house, along with the sudden appearance of a mysterious man. The scene takes a surreal turn as Oh Inju becomes overwhelmed by the intoxicating fragrance of an orchid blooming nearby. The scent induces vivid hallucinations, and Oh Inju imagines Park Sang-jung brutally dragging her best friend and hanging her in a wardrobe. Jolted back to reality, Oh Inju remembers that Hua Young once drew a similar scene. She confronts Hua Young, asking whether she witnessed her father committing murder. Hua Young, visibly shaken, denies it, explaining that the image was merely a recurring dream. She also insists that the dashcam footage only proves her father had visited Oh Inju's best friend home. Although Hua Young's words provide no conclusive evidence, she quietly hands Hua Young a sleeping pill and waits for her to fall asleep before searching for the dashcam footage again. Her younger sister unexpectedly appears, catching Oh Inju in the act, and remarking that she knew Oh Inju would come back to retrieve it. Despite the lack of solid proof, Oh Inju is determined to continue investigating her best friend, death. She decides to return to her best friend home for more clues, but realizes that Park Sang-jung's assistant is tailing her. As she leaves the house carrying a large cardboard box, the assistant stops her, suspecting that she's attempting to take away crucial documents, when a tank of startled fish spills onto Park Sang-jung's assistant, allowing Oh Inju to escape. Do-lee finds Oh Inju afterward and questions her reckless actions. Oh Inju accuses Do-lee of valuing money over human life, referencing the mysterious death of his former girlfriend during a trip. Do-lee says nothing at first, but then shows Oh Inju a photo on his phone. The woman she mentioned is actually Do-lee's first money laundering client, who faked her identity and is living a new life. Do-lee urges Oh Inju to learn patience and report any leads on Park Sang-jung immediately. Meanwhile, Park Sang-jung is attending a press conference after being exposed for claiming financial hardship while secretly inheriting a 50 billion won estate from her father. Facing media backlash, he publicly admits the inheritance but shifts the narrative by claiming he used the money to help hundreds of people and establish charitable foundations. The media's opinion quickly turns in his favor. At the event, In Hye, Oh Inju's sibling, tries to confront Park Sang-jung but is pulled away by Oh Inju. They later visit their grandmother, who advises In Hye to be patient and arranges a job for her at a real estate company. Knowing that their grandmother and Park Sang-jung's father were longtime associates, In Hye accepts the position to access records of their past real estate investments. Meanwhile, Oh Inju returns to Park Sang-jung's household, determined to gain her trust. Park Sang-jung hands Oh Inju an orchid and says that if she wants trust, she must smell the flower. The scent, she claims, will reveal Oh Inju's deepest desires. In-hee finds an old photograph in her grandmother's office. The image shows 12 members of the Orchid Association, 4 of whom were victims of the savings bank case. Only the general, the school museum curator, and their wealthy grandmother remain alive. The other 9 died under mysterious circumstances. Alarmed, In-hye rushes home, fearing for her grandmother's safety. Upon arriving, she is horrified to find Oh Inju cradling their grandmother, who is covered in blood. On the floor next to them lies the very orchid that Park Sang-jung had given Oh Inju. The scene then cuts to Park Sang-jung and his wife in a tense confrontation. Park Sang-jung attempts to be affectionate, but her wife pushes him away. Their argument escalates into a physical struggle. When the wife tries to escape, Park Sang-jung orders her to be locked in a dark room. Hwa Young, overhearing the fight, becomes anxious and struggles to breathe. She hides under the covers and tells her younger sister that they must go to a place that often appears in her dreams. Hwa Young and her younger sister enter a room that has remained untouched for years. They open a delicate box containing a model of a room where red high heels and an orchid stand out prominently. Meanwhile, In-hye and Oh-inju attend their grandmother's funeral and vow to uncover the truth behind her mysterious death. Oh-inju approaches Do-lee, offering to give him all her money if he helps solve the murder. Do-lee, however, admits he has no leads. He suggests that if Oh-inju suspects Mrs. Park, they must travel to Singapore to find more evidence. On the other side, In-hye inherits her grandmother's entire estate, only to discover that the debts exceed the value of the inheritance. Determined to protect the family legacy, she resolves to keep the company running. As In-hye goes through their grandmother's belongings with the help of a lawyer, she finds that despite not living with her grandmother for years, she still had a room reserved for her. Holding a childhood photo of herself with their grandmother, In-hye breaks down in tears. Her emotional moment is interrupted by a call from Oh-inju, who urges her to watch the news. The breaking news reveals that a suspect has confessed to their grandmother's murder, her personal assistant. The assistant claims to have killed the grandmother out of desperation after losing everything in a failed real estate investment she was encouraged to make. The sisters find the confession absurd, questioning how someone supposedly harboring resentment could have cared for their grandmother for 2 years. In-hye asks Oh-inju about the orchid found near their grandmother before she died. Oh-inju reveals her involvement with Mrs. Park and mentions that she had the same orchid during her last visit. Surprisingly, the assistant also claimed to have brought an orchid to the crime scene. Yet only one orchid was found. Where did the other one go? While searching the house, the sisters stumble upon a hidden chamber. The spacious room is empty, and the safe has been cleared out. Only a single orchid remains. In-hye deduces that this mysterious orchid can reveal a person's deepest desires. Inspired, she decides to expose the scandals involving Mrs. Park and the Orchid Society. Oh-inju, seeing her sister's resolve, agrees to assist, but insists that she must first retrieve the 700 billion won from Singapore to ensure the family's safety. While reviewing their grandmother's old photos, they uncover that their grandmother's involvement in the Orchid Society was due to her role as the personal nurse of Park Sang-jung's father. They also learn that one of the society's members did not die but merely went missing, and that missing person is Do-lee's father. The sisters choose not to confront Do-lee directly, but instead visit his mother in prison. She was sentenced to 30 years for a murder she claims she did not commit. Her husband went missing, and Do-lee never visited her. No matter how persistently the eldest sister pressed her about the Orchid Association, she remained tight-lipped. Undeterred, Oh-inju produced a photo of Do-lee and showed it to his mother, revealing that the company had lost 70 billion. Their financial manager had died, and now Do-lee had taken over the work, putting him in serious danger. Overwhelmed by fear, Do-lee's mother clutched her son's photo and, with trembling reluctance, gave Oh-inju only one address. Determined to protect Oh-inju, when Park Sang-jung's assistant later confronted her, Do-lee warned her that he had detailed knowledge of all the illegal fund flows and threatened dire consequences if he did not back off. In retaliation, the assistant reported to Park Sang-jung that the Oh-inju sisters were collaborating on an investigation led by Do-lee, which prompted Park Sang-jung to order that Do-lee be trailed. Later that evening, Oh-inju arranged to meet Do-lee at a bar and handed her the address. Furious, Do-lee threatened to cancel their cooperation, but Oh-inju then revealed a long-held secret. Before her death, their grandmother had confided that Do-lee's mother was not the killer. Instead, it was Park Sang-jung's father. Realizing that exposing Park Sang-jung's corruption and avenging her mother depended on their continued collaboration, Dolly set off to the designated address. On the way, he discovered she was being followed. Skillfully evading his pursuer, he arrived at the location, only to meet his long-missing father. After returning from this unexpected reunion, he went straight to Park Sang-jung's residence. To demonstrate his feigned loyalty, he handed him his father's address. The very next day, Park Sang-jung dispatched a team of assassins, only to fall into a trap that Dolly and his father had cleverly set. His father had even given him a blood-stained hammer, the very murder weapon used by his mother. Not long after, Dolly hurried to meet Oh In-ju on her birthday. The happiest moment for Oh In-ju came when Hwa-young presented her with a birthday gift, the dash cam from Hwa-young's car, which contained damning footage of Park Sang-jung heading to her best friend's house that very day. What was believed to be 70 billion in cash was suddenly revealed to be nothing more than a box of bricks, leaving Mrs. Park utterly dumbfounded. Oh In-ju, sporting a new look, made her way through the subway station, where she stashed 70 billion in cash in a storage locker and replaced it with a box of bricks. Meanwhile, an infuriated Mrs. Pooh determined to silence her. When she turned around, Oh In-ju had a gun pointed at someone, but Mrs. Park remained unfazed. Shortly thereafter, several burly enforcers barged in and swiftly subdued Oh In-ju. At that moment, a security guard announced that someone was throwing paper airplanes downstairs, a minor infraction under Singapore law. One of the enforcers went to investigate, only to be forcefully repelled by Dolly, who had come to Oh In-ju's rescue. Mrs. Park then raised her gun and aimed at Dolly, who calmly pulled out his cell phone. Soon, after the eldest sister learned that Oh In-ju was in grave danger, she presented incriminating anti-corruption documents implicating Park Sang-jung as leverage to secure Oh In-ju's safety. A weakened Oh In-ju reluctantly handed over the key to the storage locker and then fainted. The next day, after regaining consciousness, Dolly had Oh In-ju sign a document. While on the way to the airport, Oh In-ju received a call from a friend of the eldest sister, informing her that the eldest sister's house had been ransacked. Faced with this alarming news, Oh In-ju decided to postpone her trip to Greece and return to the country to search for her eldest sister, while urging Dolly to take care of the family if anything happened to her, though in truth, the eldest sister was not missing, but had deliberately gone into hiding. After leaving Park Sang-jung's residence earlier, Dolly's father, who was waiting at home, had suggested resolving matters through violence. However, the principled eldest sister insisted on gathering further evidence to expose Park Sang-jung. Although Dolly's father agreed to help, the eldest sister soon received a text message that spurred her into action. She resolved to go to the mental hospital to meet a former representative, who was masquerading as a patient, to gain his testimony. Seizing an opportunity, she discovered a ventilation duct and crawled through it to reach his room, assuring him that if he agreed to serve as a witness, she would help him escape. Meanwhile, Oh In-ju, tracking her sister's whereabouts via surveillance, knew that Park Sang-jung would not easily let the eldest sister go free and hurried to intercept her before he could find her. Using a fire alarm to lure Park Sang-jung's assistant to the rooftop, Oh In-ju created a diversion. At that moment, the eldest sister and the former representative had already escaped through the ventilation system. However, on the rooftop, Oh In-ju was captured by the assistant, until Dolly arrived just in time to rescue her. Everyone gathered in their secret hideout to plan their next move against Park Sang-jung, when Oh In-ju suddenly remembered that their youngest sister hadn't answered her calls for several days. Meanwhile, the youngest sister was hiding in a secluded spot that strikingly resembled the scene of a past tragedy. After returning to the country, Mrs. Park had effectively used her feminine wiles on her husband, a tactic that worked so well on Park Sang-jung that she immediately ordered her assistant to eliminate the former representative. However, the former representative escape from the mental hospital had infuriated Park Sang-jung, prompting Park Sang-jung to devise a scheme to sow discord among the three sisters. He sought out the youngest sister, promising her a life of beauty and devotion if she worked for him, to which the youngest sister superficially agreed, while secretly helping her elder sisters gather evidence. She began by reviewing surveillance footage from Park Sang-jung's house on the day that Oh In-ju's best friend was attacked. The video showed Mrs. Park wearing a carved leather coat before leaving, only for the coat to vanish by the time she returned. This footage was then shown to Park Sang-jung's daughter, Hwa Young, who declared her desire to escape the household and arranged with the youngest sister to run away after school. Yet the next day, the youngest sister mysteriously disappeared. Mrs. Park claimed she'd tracked her immigration records and noted that bank books and cash were missing, while Hwa Young, refusing to let her mother alert the police, insisted she had sent her on a trip, though in truth, she knew their mother had been controlling her. At that moment, the second sister arrived and rescued the youngest sister from her hideout. The following day, when Mrs. Park discovered her daughter was missing, she frantically searched until an associate informed her that Oh In-ju was waiting in the living room. Soon after, Oh In-ju delivered a letter from Hwa Young in which Hwa Young wrote that she longed to feel the freedom of the open air and begged her mother not to look for her. Meanwhile, seeing that his plan to capture the youngest sister had failed, Park Sang-jung shifted his focus to Do-lee. He first had his assistant secure bail for Do-lee's mother, and then informed Do-lee that his mother was nearing the final phase of her sentence. If she left the country now, she might be saved. Park Sang-jung was confident that without Do-lee's help, he could dispose of the three sisters even sooner. At that very moment, as he smugly prepared to participate in the final round of the presidential primary interview, he was stunned to see the eldest sister appearing on television, accompanied by Do-lee's mother. It turned out that Do-lee had long since seen through Park Sang-jung's true nature and had feigned an agreement to help take her mother away, all as part of a deeper strategy to expose him. Do-lee's mother publicly revealed the true culprit of a 20-year-old murder, the same person who had been close to Park Sang-jung. In the news hall, Park Sang-jung attempted to block them, but the eldest sister boldly predicted that there would be even more shocking revelations the next day. With his influence over the judiciary, Park Sang-jung suppressed the story for the time being. On the day of the presidential election, Park Sang-jung was about to give a speech when a video exposing his true nature aired on the big screen, showing him committing the murder of a former representative. It turned out that this representative had known that Park Sang-jung's power was unassailable by violence or legal means, so he secretly filmed the truth and sent the footage directly to the eldest sister 2 days before. While Park Sang-jung tried to dismiss the scandal, claiming the video was doctored, his ratings dropped, though they did not affect the election outcome. As he breathed a sigh of relief, his wife presented him with a plate of apples, next to which sat an orchid. The scent of the orchid lulled him into a moment of calm, but just as he walked toward the abandoned rooftop, he lost his balance and fell to his death. Mrs. Park, almost deranged, directly injected a poison into her father's comrade's neck. She even injected her father with the same poison, causing him to die in a nightmare. Oh In-ju's best friend, presumed dead for years, was revealed to have faked her death. Oh In-ju's best friend held a press conference, where she explained that the deceased girl was actually an online acquaintance who agreed to imitate her body shape in exchange for a large sum of money. However, before that plan could unfold, Mrs. Park mistakenly identified the girl as Oh In-ju's best friend, injected her with poison, and then strangled her to death. Oh In-ju's best friend also developed accounting software that clearly documented 25 years of embezzlement by Mrs. Park's family. Right after the press conference, Mrs. Park kidnapped Oh In-ju's best friend and sent a message to Oh In-ju. Upon receiving the information, Oh In-ju immediately alerted the police and rushed to Mrs. Park's house. Seeing her best friend tied up, Oh In-ju pulled out a grenade. Mrs. Park, laughing hysterically, revealed she had already prepared for mutual destruction by installing a sulfuric acid system in the orchid greenhouse. When Oh In-ju couldn't intimidate her, she stalled for time, exposing Mrs. Park's dark past. Mrs. Park's mother had once tried to reveal the general's crimes, but was imprisoned in a green room for 10 years. Mrs. Park, clinging to her mother, begged her to apologize to her father. In the struggle, her mother hit a table corner, but, fearing implicating her daughter, told her to run. She then hung herself in a closet, dressed in a coat and red high heels. This traumatic event left a lasting shadow on Mrs. Park, leading her to dress her victims in similar attire whenever she killed. Suddenly, The sprinkler system activated, and Oh Inju's best friend screamed in pain as she was corroded by the acid. Oh Inju threw the grenade into the drainage system, causing an explosion that lifted a manhole cover. Using it as a shield, Oh Inju rescued her best friend. At that moment, Dolly arrived with reinforcements. Seeing that the two were escaping, Mrs. Park grabbed Oh Inju's hair and tried to pull her into the acid rain. In agony, Oh Inju fought back and shoved Mrs. Park into the acid-filled pool, where she perished. The ghostly blue orchid tree also vanished forever. After the incident, Oh Inju received a large apartment from her grandmother. Inhai and her boyfriend went abroad to study. Do Li had previously transferred 70 billion yuan to Hua Young's account. Oh Inju, her younger sister, and Do Li each received 10 billion, while Oh Inju obtained 30 billion. The three sisters started a new chapter in their lives, bringing the show to a perfect conclusion. Thanks for watching. Like and drop a heart if you love the story.